Well, hi there, and welcome back. My name is Stephanie Safarian, and you're listening to episode 570 of Sustainable Minimalists. This is a listener-supported show about intentional and eco-friendly minimalist living. And on today's show, we are taking a critical look at American life in our quest to determine not only what's gone wrong, but also how we can course correct. Now, most of us listening, I'm guessing you would agree that something's not quite right in the United States at the moment. Politics aside, we're not even going there today. But there is, for many of us, this pervasive feeling that something's not quite right. We are unhappy, we are stressed out, we are isolated, and we are sad. In our never satisfied quest for more stuff, more convenience, more wealth, more happiness, more prestige even, we have lost a lot of those intangibles that make life worth living. We've given up too much. Now, my guest today argues that there are certain factors at play in the U.S. that keep us boxed in. My guest today is Steve Nygren. In the 1990s, he and his wife, they purchased a 60-acre farm for his family, including his young children, to retreat to on the weekends. They soon left Atlanta for good and moved to the farm full-time. In 1996, they turned their horse barn on the property into a bed and breakfast. And today, that bed and breakfast has become a vibrant and big community of people who want to turn traditional American suburbia on its head. Steve, how are you?
I'm good. Looking forward to the conversation.
Same. I really enjoyed your book. And what I loved about it in particular is it really outlines a lot of the ways in which we here in the United States could be living better. But before we get to all of that, and that's a lot, please tell us who you are, what you do, why you wrote a new book titled Start in Your Own Backyard, Transforming Where We Live with Radical Common Sense.
I grew up on a generational farm in Colorado. A lot of things there. Fresh food, local community, generational living. Went to the University of Colorado. A part-time job seduced me into the hospitality industry. And so I joined Stouffer's, their restaurant and hotel division back then. Everyone thinks of it as frozen foods today. And I was part of their hotel opening team. And they moved me to Atlanta, and I fell in love with Atlanta. And so I stepped off that treadmill to open my own restaurant so I could stay in Atlanta. And in the midst of that, my wife saw in the back of the Georgia Preservation newsletter that there was a historic farm for sale just south of the city. I couldn't imagine that there was really open land that close. Plus, our children were 3, 5, and 7, 3 daughters. So you can imagine you're always looking for something fun to do. So I thought, okay, this will be a Saturday afternoon drive. We'll see the country. And I called the folks and I said, we're going to be out your way. And do you have farm animals? Yes. Would you mind if we stopped in to just show our daughters? We arrived, they had the Shetland pony saddled, and we bought the farm. Now, that's an indication of I followed my heart instead of my logical mind. I thought we'd come out a couple Saturday afternoons. To my amazement, everyone was ready to leave every weekend. Now, we had a great house in the city with the pool and all the things that you think are important for a fun, engaging life. But they wanted to come to the shack where there were no toys except a puzzle for rainy days. And doing that every weekend over a 3-year period, it was my value shift. What's really important? People had a hard time understanding when we sold everything and packed up and moved to the country full time. But I think a lot of people went through that same thing during the pandemic. You start reevaluating your lives, where you live, what really is meaningful.
When you moved from Atlanta to the farm, to the shack, you call it, you started noticing some changes in your own well-being, but specifically in your daughters. Can you talk to us about some of the changes you and your family experienced once you moved?
Absolutely. So we had been there about 6 months. And at the dinner table one night, I said, are y'all glad we came out here? Because it was quite a change, all the trappings that they had in the city. And I expected them to hopefully say yes, because we have a pony now, we have bunnies, we have We each have our own goat that we help take care of, all those things that I thought was just wonderful and magical. And they, at that point, were 6, 8, and 10. And the 10-year-old looked at her sisters and looked back at me and said, yes, it's the freedom we love. That just tugged at my heart. Your freedom? What do you mean? And she says, in the city, we had that big yard, but we always knew you were in the windows watching us. And we could never ride our bicycles on the sidewalks in front of the house unless one of you were with us. And out here, we're free. And I did not realize, number one, that we were that sort of uptight, and number two, that they were noticing it. And a decade later, Richard Louv wrote the book, Last Child in the Woods. And a couple people sent that to me and said, is this what you're talking about? And I said, oh, yes. And I don't know if you're familiar with that book, but it's the importance of children growing up in unstructured social and physical environments. That's not what's happening today, and part of the pituitary brain is not developing in so many of our children today, and that's the portion of the brain that would be associated with common sense.
I'm not familiar with the book, but I'm definitely going to check it out of my library now after you recommended it. But you're talking there, I'm thinking about how, number one, not all of us can buy a farm and move to it, even though that would be lovely. But also, number two, there are just some forces at work in our society. You call them boundaries that box us in. And you would argue, and I think a lot of people might argue, that intuitively they feel that these boundaries are harming our health, harming our well-being, and definitely harming our children's well-being. What are those boundaries? What are those forces that you think are at play here?
As I discovered, there's a lot of things that we're not thinking about. Why are we dysfunctioning? Why wasn't the city working? One is the unintended consequences, for instance, of the interstate highway. Eisenhower put that in to move military troops in the event we ever needed to. It's never been used for a military purpose, but it's defined how we have developed community. And it's moved us into an auto-centric society that we're having to use cars to get to the shops, to the schools, to everything. And it's turned many parents into chauffeurs. If you couple that with social media, we think that anything that happens to a child around the world, no matter where it is, it feels the same as though it were happening in our backyard. The statistics show that there's fewer stranger-on-child crimes today than there were in 1950. But we are very fearful of what could happen to our children. We've created places where there are no eyes on the street. We live on our back decks in our fenced backyards many times across America. And so a lot of the things where parents felt okay with letting their children be more free range, as we call it, to explore on their own, has disappeared. And it's caused a fearful generation of parents raising a fearful generation of kids. I think we as adults have to look more about what kind of places have we built and moved to that force kids back to screens to connect with their friends. But I find that if you give kids a choice between being out in the woods and tree houses and running freely with their friends versus being in the house with your parents on a screen, they will choose to be outside a good portion of the time. You're not going to totally remove them maybe from the screens, but it will not be their only way to connect.
Yeah, I'm thinking about my own daughters as you're talking there. The screens are a definite pull. They definitely have a hold on not just my children, but I'm sure the parents listening would say screens have a hold on their children as well, because they can be addictive. But I'm thinking about the forces at play that are pushing us indoors. And then when we're indoors, the screens just, are a natural consequence of being indoors. I'm thinking of Suburban Sprawl. I'm thinking of you need a car to get anywhere you really want to go. You need a car to go see your friends. We're, especially after COVID, so many of us are just retreating into our homes with consequences. I mean, we're living in an loneliness epidemic right now. If we're in our homes, we're not necessarily moving our bodies as much as we should be. America loves its sprawl. America loves its suburbs and subdivisions and lawns coated with chemicals and definitely the cars. But how are these loves hurting us?
I don't think we can deny any of the statistics. We are more obese, and what a shame. For the first time in civilization, we have obesity and malnutrition in some of the same bodies. We've gotten to the point that some of the things that we are labeling as food actually has no nutrition at all, only calories. And so that's one serious issue right there. Antidepressants in America increase each decade. If you look at the national joy scale in the United States drops by 2 to 3 points. I don't think we can deny that things are not exactly working, that children and our people are not thriving on any human scale that you would consider that. What I'm curious about, Stephanie, is why aren't more people asking why? We seem to think that we have no choice in this, and we do, and that's one of the reasons I've written the book.
I'm going to talk to you about that in a minute, specifically about the choices that we do have. But I'm going to quote you, which is always a little awkward to read somebody's words back to them. But in your book, you write, quote, "Intellectually and instinctively, we know that our diet, lack of exercise, loneliness, and stress are killing us. We know we need human connection. We know our kids are suffering. We know our climate is being destroyed. We know all these things, so why can't we make a change? It's because everything in society is working against us. It's so much easier to stay stuck in a rut, thinking that this is just how it has to be." And when I read that in your book, Steve, I just was blown away. What would you say to listeners who are hearing us talk right now and are saying, yeah, we are stuck in the rut that Steve's mentioning, but the societal forces at play, the way that Americans do America, are keeping us down?
Stop thinking that it has to be big government or big corporations that change our lives. And so we resign ourselves to we have nothing to do about it. And that's just not the way it is. This is not going to be solved by any of the big governments or corporations or any of the other large factors that I see. Through history, it's generally not what happens. It's market forces that change trends. No matter what political party, no matter what religion, we all want healthy kids. And none of this has happened because we intentionally wanted to disrupt our kids' lives and make the population less happy. A lot of greed by corporations and products have led us there, and our own decisions in looking for cheap, we think is the best value, but we're not looking at comparables. Cheap food doesn't mean it's healthy food. We have not been able to connect the cost of health with some of these decisions that we're making of where we live and what we're putting in our bodies. There's not really good indicators that give you on a daily basis as you're purchasing and making these decisions, the human consequences that are associated with it. And so that's why very few people are digging. Now, we can find out more things than we ever have, but that's my curiosity is why aren't we asking those hard questions when we know it's not working? I think the one thing that pushes people into that uncomfortable place is for our children. The health and the well-being of our own children will push us. It pushed me into that uncomfortable place of giving up everything. And one of the best decisions I did. What I'm recommending is you connect with people who have common concerns in your neighborhood, wherever you are, and find those areas that you agree on. For instance, lawns has become just an American staple. In suburbia, everywhere, everyone seems to have a lawn. It's the cheapest way for developers to cover the disturbed land when new houses are built, and people just continue with these lawns that have to be chemicalized generally if they're going to look decent. Then we have noise pollution and keeping them cut and maintained, and it's absorbing our times on the weekends when, it'd be better to be with your family and loved ones doing things. And because of the chemicals, we're disturbing the natural predators to many of the bugs that irritate us. So then we're spraying to control that. And all of a sudden we're living in a chemical waste dump without thinking about it and understanding it. And many people don't want to be the only ones to rip up their lawns and put things in it that aren't lawn. It's a lot richer landscape where you have the various shapes, tones, colors. And so here's a good case where we think it's something that we have to have, and yet there's an alternative that's more beautiful, certainly a lot more healthy for us, and it's more affordable. You don't have to maintain it all the time. So I think of neighbors on a street, so you're not by yourself, just start talking about it. I think it's one of those things we don't think about because just everybody's been living with this condition.
We live in a world overflowing with cheap, disposable stuff, and footwear is no different. All too often, the inexpensive or trendy footwear is uncomfortable, and that's because of their narrow, unnatural shapes. The trendy stuff also is cheaply made and often doesn't last, but duck feet? Duck feet's different. Since 1975, designed in Denmark and handcrafted with old-world craftsmanship, Duck Feet makes leather shoes and boots that are foot-shaped. Each pair is lovingly built with durable, natural Italian crepe soles and sustainably made, socially conscious Terracare leather. They are resolable, which means you can keep a pair of duck feet for the rest of your life, and many people do. Just check out the thousands of 5-star reviews on their website. I have a pair of boots from Duck Feet. They're so comfortable I can walk miles in them, and I happily do. They break in, they mold, they stretch to your foot, they build character and memories along the way. Stop buying disposable footwear. Head to duckfeetusa.com and use code MamaMinimalist for $50 off your first pair. That's duckfeetusa.com with code MamaMinimalist for $50 off your first pair. I love that answer, Steve, because I live in a neighborhood and a lot of my neighbors really care about their lawns. But you made the point very clear that lawns, we need to ask ourselves, who are the lawns benefiting? And you made it clear. Lawns benefit developers who need to cover up these piles of soil after they disrupt the lands. Lawns benefit chemical companies, pesticide makers, right? Because we need to continuously purchase these chemicals, these toxic chemicals, to make our lawns look pristine like our neighbors. But are the lawns benefiting you and me? And that the lawns is just one of many examples. We can talk about our cars and we can think critically about who the cars are benefiting. Are they benefiting us in the long run? Are the suburbs? And so we could go on, but I really want to talk to you about Serenbe. What is Serenbe and what does Serenbe do differently?
Yeah, I was a naive developer once I realized I was doing this, and it's a whole journey as to why I realized we had to develop to save it because it was the only thing sustainable. None of the preservation companies, and that wasn't sustainable if you just raise money to save the land. So this has turned into a model for communities and local zoning. But we cluster the development and preserve 70% of it for agriculture or forestry or recreation. Now, by doing this, we're bringing the same or more housing units. This means those are generally smaller housing units that are clustered together, so it's a very walkable. Very much like any communities in America and Europe from 100 years ago. This isn't new. This is just pre-addiction to our automobile period of time. We put a farm right next to the houses, which no one was doing 20 years ago. Everyone thought farms were stinky. Industrial, chemical-induced farms are, but not organic, natural farms. So if you were to describe what is Serenbe, it is designed as a place where we respect one another and nature. And so if you think about a place that connects us to each other and to nature, that's key. And I think post-pandemic, there's a lot of research that's come out about the problems. what drove people into mental anxiety and some of our mental health. Mental health is best when you're connecting to each other and to nature. There's all those studies are showing it. Yet we've been developing places for the last 5, 6 decades that separate us from both of those things. And then we wonder why we're depressed. We've got these big machines that we drive into our closed garages and get out, and we need something. We get back in those machines. Our mail's generally delivered out of convenience to our front porch or maybe at the box at the end of our sidewalk. So we don't go very far to get our mail. So we don't connect with our neighbors because we're always in these isolated situations to actually take care of our basic needs every day. We have clustered mailboxes. And the joke is, gosh, it takes me 2 hours to get my mail. They're running into friends and meeting people, and we've had more friendships, romances, business partners created, travel groups by just running into everybody. And everyone says, gosh, it feels like I'm back on a college campus because of the spontaneity that happens when you're walking on the street where you live.
I love that because your answer there makes me think about what it was like when I was in college. You couldn't be isolated in a dorm if you wanted to.
Exactly.
And you're right. The research abounds with regard to the fact that we are social creatures, even the most introverted amongst us. We need to be around people. Driving our hunk of metal into our garage, closing the door, and going straight into our house and never seeing another human is not the best for our own health and well-being. But I don't want listeners to think that Serenbe is just a place with clustered mailboxes. You have revolutionized life, basically. And I say revolutionized, but that might not be the right word because in a lot of ways you've gone back to basics. In what other ways is Serenbe different from the average American subdivision?
One of the big things is being a hospitality person. When I realized I was going to develop, having places for people to connect, having those hospitality centers. We built a coffee shop and restaurant in the middle of the woods across from the townhouse we were building by the time the fourth resident moved in. Now, you don't find that in any suburban areas that number one, if you can even walk to it, but it certainly doesn't lead the development. It's generally at a later part of time. And so I think it's understanding what we need to really prosper in a community versus shelter. We have been building shelter mostly. We haven't been building communities in the last several decades. And so it's to thinking about whether, and this can happen if you have existing communities, how can you transform it as a community, as a neighborhood, as a street? Start asking those questions. It doesn't have to be a coffee shop. It could be other things that you do that creates a place for people to gather naturally, not a clubhouse, because that's something you reserve and go to. Some of your suburban neighborhoods, they all have fenced backyards, which actually are prisons for your kids rather than safety nets. What if you tore down all the fences and created community gardens and play areas to where everyone came out? Most people are living on their back decks or in their front porches. So, okay, turn it around. It's eyes then on the street. You don't have to be anxious if various people are using their decks as in front porches. That's one reason Serenbe is such a safe place and people feel good with the kids is because people are on their front porches. There's eyes on the street.
I was talking to one of my coworkers this week, and my coworker was talking about how, in a lot of ways, modern 2025 American life is the utopia of the people who lived in the Middle Ages dreams, right? We have inequality, poverty aside, a lot of us have enough food, enough clothes, we have shelters, we are heated and cooled appropriately, we have schooling, you name it. A lot of the problems of centuries, generations past have been solved for not all, but many of us. My response to that was, I think we've moved into dystopia realm. I don't think this is this is no longer a utopia if it ever was. And I think the reason is because modern American life has stripped away some of the essentials that make life beautiful. And I'm talking about community. I'm talking about time in nature. I'm talking about movement. I'm talking about good food that's nutritious. We've stripped all that away in the pursuit of convenience, isolation, our digital lives. And so, in my view, and again, this is coming back around, there is a question here, but in my view, the utopia that we're all striving for, the utopia of the future, is about going back in some ways and taking those really important things that have, for some reason, and because of some interests, been stripped away, bringing them back. What are your thoughts there?
I think we have somehow developed a false sense of what we have. We only look at hunger and shelter as the measurement issues that we're better off than the middle of the century. And there's certainly other people that live differently. But I think it's a little bit like the emperor has no clothes. We've all convinced ourselves that these affordable mansions by many standards, the piles of food that is not nutritious, is somehow a measurement of success and happiness. And I think every indicator shows that those are shallow and actually not giving us places that we can thrive. We're not building an ecosystem that connects us to the important things. And so I think it's simply that we have convinced each other that we have success. And in reality, it's quite the opposite when anybody starts looking around them. You said it earlier. Everyone will agree, no matter where you're coming from, that it's not working. So how can we possibly consider that anywhere near a utopia?
Yeah. Okay, so I have done a lot of research into Serenbe. It looks like a lovely place that I want to move to. However, I'm sure that I have lots of listeners right now, for whatever reasons, they cannot move to a biophilic community like Serenbe. So for those people listening, they want to make their existing neighborhood, their existing apartment building, their existing, wherever they live, more Serenbe-like, Serenbe adjacent, let's say. Where should they start?
How about putting a blueberry bush in your front yard, down your walk, so you pass it all the time? And if you don't have a yard, how about putting it in a pot on a back deck? Blueberry bushes. We put them at every crosswalk. It has created more community, more interest, and kids are starting to understand the seasonality of foods. They know that when the service berry comes out, now, I bet a lot of listeners don't know what a service berry is because we don't have them on our grocery shelves because they don't have shelf life. They're these wonderful little things that are like a sweet plum. But the kids know that when the service berries come out, the next thing's the blueberry bush. And blueberry bushes, for like the 6 weeks that those bushes are producing these sweet, healthy pieces, the community comes alive in a different way. Everyone's out stopping and gathering or picking, exchanging pie and jam recipes. At the farmer's market, certain times we have a contest on who's got the best blueberry this or that. But I think one of the great stories, someone who's lived there a few years, and someone from the city came out and they were having dinner. And at the close of the dinner, the hostess, she said, "Oh, and we're going to have blueberries for dessert, and maybe we'll have some homemade ice cream put on." And she said, the visiting parents got up to help and headed to the refrigerator while her kids ran outside. And just that alone, it shows it wasn't a teaching that was in the books or talking about seasonality or fresh foods. The kids live it. And they know the taste of fresh food, whether it's lettuce or blueberries or whatever. So the more we can grow, and it doesn't have to be a garden. You can put some of these fruit-bearing trees and things, in a correct landscape in your yard or in your pots. And it does so much, not only providing you great food, but lessons and fun to watch things grow. And wow, anybody can do that wherever they live.
Yeah. As you're talking there, Steve, I'm just thinking about the intricacies of my own town, my own neighborhood. It could be, as you said, to your amazing point, like plant some blueberry bushes in the front yard that people congregate around. It could be not driving your child in your SUV to the bus stop, right? Like it could be making a habit of walking your child to the bus stop and saying hello to your neighbors as you do it. It could be not driving your car to the mailbox, which does happen in my neighborhood. It could be walking to the mailbox, right? It could be baking muffins and knocking on your neighbor's door. It could be getting off your Peloton bike. And I will say I love my Peloton bike, but it could be getting off the Peloton bike and riding your real bike in your real neighborhood. These are just common sense ways to like get outside, get talking to people, and rebuilding community. Do I have that right?
You have it absolutely right. And see, you rattled off a whole group of ideas, but we're not asking the question. That's what troubles me. Once we start asking the question, we can start thinking of all ways that we can connect with each other and with nature. It's really not that hard, but we have to think about big pharma, big ag. There's a lot of money in not propelling these concepts on a national basis. But markets have to change it. People being born today, people who are in their 20s, early 30s, have been born into a very fragile world. They've grown up concerned about what's going to happen to their future and their life. And I think that this is the group, from a market standpoint, are not going to put up with the things our generations have created and put up with. They're not going to be sold that empty caloried food just because it's cheap is what they want. And it's going to, they see how unhealthy we are. And once they are really the prime purchasers, once they start stepping into the boardrooms, I think it's going to be different. And I certainly hope that many of us who are stepping into elderhood, such as I am, some of your generation where their kids are getting out, so where you're not having to worry about just every day, that we start changing society as a whole.
And that change starts by asking some questions.
That's where it begins. We know it in our heart. We just know it's maybe going to be difficult decisions that we don't want to go, so we just continue to push it back, and that's not mentally healthy for any of us.
Things change when we start asking questions and we start seeking answers.
That's right.
I like that. I could talk to you all day, Steve, but
come see me. We'll have a cup of tea and we'll solve the problems of the world right there.
I would love to. I would love to.
Bring the girls.
Yes, I'll bring my daughters. For listeners who just want to keep talking to you all day, just like I want to keep talking to you all day, tell them where they can find, first of all, your new book, but also your community, Serenbe.
That's right. So the book can be purchased on any local bookstore. Also, you can follow me at Steve, S-T-E-V-E, Nygren, Nygren.com, all lowercase, one word. And then Serenbe.com, Serenbe, and that'll take you to our community and links to everything going on.
Wow, amazing conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephanie. Enjoyed the conversation.
Listeners, that's a wrap. My friends, show notes are at MamaMinimalist.com/570. I've linked to Steve. I've linked to Serenbe. I've linked to everything that you need to go research more of in this week's show notes. So just unrelated, I am currently in the middle of finally reading The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. If you've read it, you already know it's a phenomenal, amazing book. If you have not read it yet and you are a parent, heck, even if you're not a parent, I think you should probably read this book. The Anxious Generation is so good. It doesn't only mention that screens are really bad for developing brains, but it says why. To my book club members, I'm telling you right now, I'm going to recommend this book for book club. If you're looking for a great book to read, pick up The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. Wow. it has solidified a lot of my thoughts on screens and their presence in my children's lives. So pick it up, Anxious Generation. We'll be back next week. I'll see you then. As always, you can reach out if you need me, either via email or on socials. All that is also in the show notes. Thanks for being here. Send me your eco tips and take care.